Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Very warm welcome. CPEC has become another name in the dictionary nowadays, and people sometimes understand what CPECs mean and want to understand and know what the words are for. They sometimes have to know. It has become very popular, sort of a nomenclature. But what this project is and what sort of opportunities and on the other side challenges are attached to it, and I think it's be very useful if we do academic discussion on that rather than going by the norms of what is going on in the media and on the other places. For that very reason, we have invited today a gentleman who's at the helm of affair as far as the academics of this projects are concerned. We have today with us Dr. Sohail Safdar. He's Executive Director of the Center of Excellence, which has jointly been formed by the Planning Commission and PIDE, and it's fully functional. Dr. Very warm welcome. What would you say is the basic premise on this project and what it entails?
I think, thank you very much first of all for calling me here and giving this opportunity to talk about this project, if you may call, and its significance for Pakistan and its economy. It is called a project in the sense as we use for Marshall Plan, for example, but in fact it has many projects in it, and the very name has economic corridor. So the way economic corridor economy operates, so that angle is also there. And if you take this time sense of the whole process which is there, this $46 billion component is the early harvest part, and then is the short term and then medium term and long term ending at 2030. So roughly you can say that starting with 2013 and ending in 2030, that's the
about
time.
17 years.
Yeah, about 17 years. Then if you look at the geographical aspect of it, the heart of it or the core is the Gwadar-Kashgar linkage, which is the corridor to start with. But then if you look at the other aspects of the project, it's basically a project to intensify economic partnership between Pakistan and China in the coming years for the mutual benefit of both the countries. So there is a lot of keen interest in CPEC, the kind of investment which is coming, where it's going, what benefits would it have for the Pakistan economy. But looking at the investment patterns in Pakistan, Pakistan has been getting very little investment over the last few years. Traditionally, Pakistan has been a country where FDI did not come. If it came more to the mining or to the services sector when we liberalized telecom sector. And then due to insecurity, Pakistan had very little FDI, and our domestic investment rates are also very low. In that context, having this kind of an investment with this kind of a holistic approach of integrating both the economies is really a big news for
It's
Pakistan. And for Pakistan, this is a different kind of challenge, one would say. Pakistan has FTAs with Sri Lanka, Malaysia, China even. We have been having FDI from, let's say, European countries, from US. We already have one transit route from Karachi to Afghanistan, which is operative. But such a process, in its importance, in its enormity, in its significance of its goals, is really new and rare, and that's where its significance is coming from.
Right now, the word, if we just neglect for convenience, the command economy, and that part obviously, and we have traditionally been attached with the West for very obvious reasons. We were part of the military built up earlier and before the Soviet Union, and after that, what happened in Afghanistan. So traditionally, we are very used to the Bretton Woods institutions. If there's a problem, then International Monetary Fund would come and give you a recipe. For development, you look forward towards the World Bank or the Asian Development Bank and other institutions, the IFCs and other attached to them. And when investment comes to Pakistan, most often the sort of insurance cover would come from the Exim Bank of United States or other things. And somehow or the other, the string, that chandelier is attached to the roof of USA, of the West. Because in the World Bank, even they are the board majority stakeholder. Now the China has also been, and the reserve currency was dollar and Saudi Arabia. You know the picture. Now the China has come and they have a big plan. This one belt, one road is the whole. And this is one belt where manufacturing would come, and the road is marine road that through the Suez Canal to the North Africa and the Europe. Another such corridor is going to the Moscow and Helsinki. And so it's global. It truly it is Eurasian in the nature. Do you think that 10 years, 20 years down the line, Pakistan would be relevantly free of the influence of the West, and that's why we are calling it a game changer?
Well, you see the geo-economic part of it, which is another subject of debate, I would say, and there are many more competent people around to talk about that aspect. Our center would be focusing more on the economic side of it. Which course would this economic partnership take? China is a phenomena which cannot be ignored by any country which is serious about its own development. I remember in 2010, World Bank was saying that any country in the world would be bound to have a China strategy, even China ministry. China,
or even learn the Mandarin language.
Yeah, that also. China, for the first time historically, last year was the most important investor in Germany, for example. So let's take China in its economic dimensions, and with $3.5 trillion of investable resources, and their economy now reaching at a certain stage where they want to reduce their dependence on exports, that would remain one of their major area of activity. But traditionally their most important export destinations were EU and US. Now with this One Belt, One Road, this is the region which they are going to invest in and integrate with the economy. And there I think a useful comparison is basically ASEAN-China integration. You can also think of Japan-China, Taiwan-China, Hong Kong-China, Korea-China, but then ASEAN also. And if you look at the data, the figures, most of the ASEAN countries and ASEAN in general also have increased their exports to China 10 times over the last 15 years. And that is underpinned by a great improvement in trade facilitation. From China to Thailand, the container passes in few seconds time. Then the production sharing arrangements, which have resulted in creating efficiencies in different countries of ASEAN with Chinese, that part of China. And in this, remembering this context now, this is the integration of China with Pakistan's market. We already have an FTA. We have been importing from China, exporting.
And it's working. It improves trade from 1 to 15 billion.
Yeah, Pakistan's rate of growth of exports is higher than the Chinese rate of growth of exports to Pakistan. So
we are the beneficiaries.
Better. But now, how do you go from a shallow integration to a deeper integration? That is by bringing in investment, services sector, and that is what this project aims at, what is technically in our trade language is called deeper integration. So there our center would be producing that policy relevant knowledge, where we would try to develop simulations and those templates which would be useful for Pakistan in the long term perspective, that should Pakistan and China be kind of preferred economic partners, a customs union or an expanded FTA, but a partnership which enhances, accentuates the efficiencies in production in Pakistan, so that both the countries are becoming partners over a period of time to the mutual benefit of the societies of both the countries.
Before we go to the break, just one last question. Do you think it can serve for China as an alternative to the South China Sea?
Well, that again, the route options. Every country wants to diversify its routes. China has this declared intention of changed economic geographies within China also now, with focus on
coming to mainland.
Yeah, so that for them it makes a natural choice, but at the same time the Chinese have been very keenly working on reducing their dependence on maritime trade
In South China Sea.
Yeah, and well, I mean, in general, you see, I mean, this Gwadar would also have the maritime component, but I think they are investing much more on having rail links with EU, for example, even with the US towards Alaska also. They are making some 8,000 miles long train. So that's a different concept altogether, that if maritime, you can have your one container from Shanghai to Hamburg in 1 month. By train, if you can take it in 15 days. So it's a different economics altogether. So both are important. They would like to diversify their maritime options, but I personally think that a bigger importance is being given by the Chinese to the land links, and there, what you said earlier, the Eurasian phenomena. You know, once when one would hear for the first time, I myself heard Chinese in 2014 in an investment conference in Poland, where Chinese said that we are a Eurasian power. So it was hard to imagine a few years before that how China could be a Eurasian power, but that is through this interconnection of a huge land mass which has been close to the outside world for the last about 100 years, where Chinese are opening up with an active collaboration of their partners, and we are part of that.
Yeah. And the Russian in the Conference of Parliamentarian, which Pakistan has tabled, and Mushahid Hussain was one of the person there. Even Russians came and they said we are Eurasian power, and they are also flexing their military muscle that one as well. But coming back to China, so we need to put our act together in Pakistan. What are the most important things, one or two things?
Well, I think if depends that where do you focus on. There are connectivity projects, and when it comes to a connectivity project, obviously timelines is an important element. One of the key component is the connectivity between Gwadar and
rest of the territory.
Yeah. So there to make routes in time, and then routes is not only for passage of truck from point A to B. There is whole aspect of trade facilitation which is there. So Pakistan is not that bad on trade facilitation indicators as such. We do fairly well, and now after signing WTO's trade facilitation agreement, there is a renewed interest in trade facilitation also. I think there improving the land ports is one of the most important aspects which has to be there, and then to imagine creation of activity on the route in such a way that it adds value to the transit trade in general. So that is when it comes to the connectivity part. Bulk of the investments, as you know, are coming into the energy projects, which is in IPP mode. There again, I think meeting the timelines is very important, because Pakistan is waiting for that day when we would overcome our energy shortages and our industry would get energy all the time. So I think timely implementation of projects is key in this early harvest, because we need to get out of this early harvest the soonest possible, and then the second stage where the special economic zones have to build, new investment has to come. International investors are already taking a keen interest in that. So there the third challenge is to improve your investment system in general in such a way that Pakistan
on the heels
can
of
attract investment from all sources.
Right. So here we take a break, and after the break we'll further analyze the project, its implication and situation around us. So please stay with us.
It's diverse.
It's original.
It's SDTV.
Welcome back. You said early harvest. What does it mean? What are the indicators? What would be on the ground and would have been done? You said that the early harvest portion, and what we'll go to the corridor and we'll find certain things happening over there. What those things would be?
Yeah, the most important obviously is the full functioning of Gwadar port, which also means that the shipments would start coming and start going to China. So that
is not happening.
That's not happening through
I
this
remember they
route
had some
now.
wheat.
Yeah, that bulk shipments have been coming to Gwadar, but that was less of a market mechanism,
Ceremonial.
more of no. I mean, you see, in Karachi, if you have congestion and if you can have ring, but more of a policy decision to do that. But here it would be more shifting of the bulk of Chinese. I think Chinese imports would keep on coming through Karachi also, but
for some time.
gradually shifting it to Gwadar, and then the
Energy dispatches and raw material.
yeah, the ambition regarding Gwadar, the petrochemical industry, and so that I think in early harvest, that is obviously the heart of it, which has to be there. But then energy, IPP
That will help build
investment.
petrochemical industry in Gwadar as well.
Yeah, that but that is the
Refineries
Chinese perspective,
plastic and other things.
that this route they would like to use it as an energy corridor. So that's a different kind of ball game. But when it comes to IPP, there the early harvest basically means that by 2017-18 you should be able to add significant new energy to Pakistan's national grid.
And the road and rail links would be completed to some extent.
To a large extent, I would say.
To large.
But
What does it
Chinese-
mean?
Well, I mean,
What does
you
it
see
entail?
This remains a commercial proposition that Chinese are now using this route for imports. So, which are the most efficient routes? And most of the routes, like Eastern route, for example, is already functional. It needs upgradation. The Western route, they would now start work on that. The middle
The road or
route,
rail, Western?
it's initially road. It's initially road. So there in 2-3 years time, I mean that's the early harvest time zone, and they definitely the road infrastructure would be there enough for taking the load that Chinese are imagining.
But even on the west side, you have some road links, for example, in Bulan from Quetta, and even on the Chaman side, but then Bulan, and that comes to Rodi and Sakhar, very close to the Sindh border. You have some that can be upgraded as well, or the dual eyes or something.
I think that's what they're doing. All the routes are
Existing routes.
being upgraded, and I think that would be used by Pakistani exports also. So if we have to integrate whole of Pakistan economy with the Chinese economy, then all the routes would be functional, and with the passage of time, the routes which are passing through sparsely populated areas with the special economic zones, with new investments there, with policy push to integrate the the production in those areas with Chinese market, the development would come to those areas also. And there I think I must point out that when it comes to the trans-frontier cooperation, which is also one of the important components of CPEC, which aims at integrating the production and investment in Xinjiang region with Pakistan, particularly Gilgit-Baltistan and KPK. So that's a huge promise, and already federal government and provincial governments are engaged in doing production mapping of these areas, skill mapping of these areas, preparing these areas to add value to their production and shift it, reorient it towards the Chinese market. So that process is already started in as far as planning is concerned, and once you have roads, then with the addition of special economic zones, then the private sector is also gearing up to
seize the moment,
enjoy the understand the demand on the Chinese side and to respond.
By the end of the 2017, are you saying that the $46 billion, what they call it, I mean it's a ballpark figure, if best it is called, that would be there, all the energy project, coal fired especially, would be up and running and spewing carbon. All the rail networks, most of them would be functional, and a very strong footprint would be on the ground. And you call it that the early harvest period has been completed. Now you're going to the...
Yeah, I think there could always be some flexibility. The connectivity part should be there in 2-3 years time.
And the energy
on
one?
The IPP depends on the pace of achieving financial close of different projects, and there I think already financial close of projects worth $5-6 billion has already been done, which is a good pace, one would say, and the government is very keen on that. There are high level
$6 billion I mean about 6,000 megawatt. That would be sort of a money in old days. I don't know what is the asking price nowadays, but at least more than 6,000.
But that is, you see, the financial close already done. More financial close agreements would be there. I mean, when you ask me that would this money be spent, now this money, one needs to imagine that in IPP mode there is a certain equity part, and the remaining is would be
some loans,
and for plant and machinery. So when exactly the plant and machinery of a particular project would come, I mean that could go beyond 2017-18 also. But I think the bulk
financial
of the
close would be there.
Financial close is the key to watch. Once the financial close is done, I mean these are projects which are huge projects, so some projects could take longer than the other ones, but I think there is a serious effort to take these projects forward.
Financial for the benefit of, I know it would be, it would be another question, but for the benefit of the viewers, what you calling, for the very understanding the ABC, financial closures mean that everything has been agreed, finance has been arranged, and the civil work is about to begin. You are saying that. So it's quite an achievement, because the rest of the run-of-the-mill things.
You see, the traditional IPP or even other projects, they take a lot of time, and it's better to spend a bit more time on
financial close
on taking care of all aspects instead of putting artificial timelines and rushing for that and making mistakes.
Are you advising them on tariffs as well? Because I remember when the American investment came here initially, and as a stakeholder, because I was a working journalist at that time, I was very keen. The initial proposition would be that the shortage at that time was 1400 megawatt. The tariff would be given for 1400 megawatt and the rest would be bidding. But then it did not stop and went up to 6,000 or 7,000 megawatt and 12.5 cents. And you know the history, we don't need to report that. And one of the IPP was the biggest, the HUBCO was not even IPP. It has public sector money and other things as well. So are you advising them on tariff? Especially, I am asking this question because at the world stage, the game is changed. Now they are talking about the renewables. Germany is switching, they are just even closing down their nukes and all. In the Paris Agreement, if you see the 2 degree, then the amount of Pakistan has not peaked. But obviously at some point Pakistan is going to peak, and then you have to give your INDCs, what they call it as, indices, what you're going to bring it down. So are you advising them on tariff? Because at that time, at the end, repatriation as well, because that was another issue, because the whole of the money was repatriated in less than 2.5 or 3 years.
Yeah, well, you see,
and they were not interested in
understanding Pakistan's experience in IPPs and making it available to the policy community for a scientific debate, for better ideas for future. Yes, that our center would be interested in. Our center is interested with the responsibility of providing research-based knowledge, advice, one can say, intellectual support, technical backstopping to the government of Pakistan. We of course have NEPRA for the final tariffs, and NEPRA has its own resources, its own history, which I have high regard for NEPRA. If you look at the annual reports,
that is the only thing they do it very good.
Yeah, but well, I mean, if an institution,
I would say to the standard of
international, yeah. So if an institution can produce those kind of reports, that means they know what they're talking about. Yeah.
Someone else don't let them do.
But I think this sustainability of FDI as a policy topic has many relevant, valid questions, and there's a lot of work going on in different policy think tanks all over the world, analyzing the experiences of different countries, and we would also network with these institutions, would produce our own work. Also, our institute obviously in the beginning would not be able to produce all that work, but this is an area which for us sustainable investment is one of major area of our work as a think tank that we would be involved.
Giving advice on tariff, or at least watching that, I think it should have been done before the financial close. No,
it must have happened.
Are you pushed? No, you're not doing.
We're very new. Very new, but one would imagine that a lot of work must have gone
in chunks, bits and chunks.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you see, whenever a proposition comes to NEPRA, they take their time, do their work, engage into negotiation and all that. I mean, all that normally should happen must have been happening.
Here we take another break, and after the break, we'll try to synthesize and try to arrive on some sort of common ground for your understanding, so please stay with us.
It's diverse.
It's original.
It's SDTV.
Welcome back. What is the conclusion? If I ask you for a one-liner, what do you think? What is the in the beginning I asked you for the basic premise. Now I ask you for the one-liner. What do you think?
Well,
or two-liner or three-liner?
Should be excited about the opportunity and motivated to benefit from the opportunity. I think this is your motivation, your will, and expectation of a reason-based expectation of a positive outcome, which should motivate all the implementers of CPEC projects to put out their best. I always imagine an analogy that in agriculture, for example, you have variable yields, starting with the best in agriculture university research forms, and then in a small non-mechanized form. Pakistan and Pakistanis should be able to carry out CPEC projects at the same level of efficiency as a research form does. I think that is a sentiment which needs to be promoted and institutionalized, and once for all effect those governance capacity changes which have been pulling us down.
Public managers are agreed on it. They are pushed for that.
Public manager is also very motivated. The people
To bring it to the event grade, the research grade.
I think
They want that.
I've started meeting people and ministry secretaries of different departments and heads of different
The political
institutions.
decision makers.
There's a lot of expectation, motivation, sense of responsibility, and I think media has accentuated this sense of responsibility also, that there is a big opportunity, so we need to come up to the mark. So there's no need to despair.
Before we go away, just last question. It's a preposition. I would say golden preposition for Pakistan and for the region, in fact for the whole world. These are changing times, and the Chinese call them interesting times. Confucius, wordings. Do you think the preposition is bigger than the bad intentions of outsiders and the bickering of insiders?
Well, you see, there are always people and forces which favor status quo, and there are always forces even outside which want to see things changing. If you ask me personally, Chinese phenomena is basically a development phenomena, an economic phenomena, and you cannot compete an FDI with guns. So if anybody thinks that is possible, that's not. So in that sense, managing the risks of this huge project, that's another kind of challenge, which we have identified some of the risks in our conversation. The people who may like to oppose the change in status quo, let's hope they see the larger promise of development for the whole region. Iran has now also become a willing partner in this one Belt, One Road. China is offering it to all the countries, including India, this China, Myanmar, Bangladesh, India corridor. So this is my sincere hope that this region would see the promise of development with the help of this huge regional integration process. Even within South Asia also, there is a great desire among the people of South Asia to go for the choices which are pro-development. So I think we would set a good example of developing an inclusive growth model in Pakistan for others to follow.
Thank you very much, Dr. for coming to the program, and with this we come to, there's a lot of discussion. There are other dimensions, but unfortunately we don't have time, and we'll keep on doing these sort of programs at this platform and on other platforms. So please keep watching our program.